My theory on human mind was then finally created. The greatest form of energy that the human body-mind can produce follows the dynamic vectorial direction of its natural, that is mental human evolution. 2. The most essential task to realize in this evolutionary vector is an interpretation task. This theory is now expressed in my essays and books and in my PhD thesis. About children, I demonstrate that the syncretic weakness in the Piagetian sense of expression, weakness of a preschool child's numerical reasoning, is here now the actual root of the highest scientific peaks that the great genius of mathematics reach in their adult age. In other words, I show that the strange and for us ordinary adults quite an enigmatic preschool phase of our cognitive development is in reality the real root of the bewildering and exotic fruits, as Gelman and Galveston expression says, fruits of the highest mathematical creation. A teacher must then speak to pupils not only about the positive, so to say, evidence of the world, but also about the negative evidence, such as, for example, 2 power 0 equal 1, or what no adult will ever be able to explain, but about what he can certainly speak of with calmness, while smiling and with attention to the contemplative silence of a child, that is to the actual and real root of man, that never expects to complete the complete certainty of truth from adults, but that understands very well if someone is truly speaking to him. 2. In what concerns adult people, if the childish perception of the world doesn't disappear from the human mind, but reappears later in adulthood, in which kind of mental activity can we use it when we can already read and perfectly understand mathematics? The OECD, here above, answer this question. Reflectiveness allows individuals to think about their technique, assimilated it. And we have seen that this is the most important case skill that the OECD's DESECO program speaks about, the meditation of an already acquired symbolic mental skill. Philosophical meditation on science as a practice of making sense. This is the proposition of my center. Now, all along my writing I say, doing and reading are events, as is operating, because for human being every evidence is an event. Every operation necessarily is performed in an individual time, as every symbol necessarily occurs, happens, in an individual mental life. Then, when a man is obliged to reflect on the operation he is performing, his mind finally re-establishes his contact with the innerly historical and event-driven nature of his internal world. And this is making sense. Actually, we know that all great mathematicians and scientists have had this kind of interior, very troubling experience of symbolic and experimental evidence. Finally, I say all men that really and sincerely face the negative and paradoxical evidence of Cantorian and Dedekind set theory, so as the whole of number is the same number as a single part of them, are intensely shocked by such a totally unexpected apparition. Then, if a man decides to take his time to reflect on the meaning of this troubling manifestation, during this time his mind will acquire more and more the athletic vigor that George Boole speaks about. I quote, to supersede the employment of common reason, or to subject it to the rigor of technical forms, would be the last desire of one who knows the value of that intellectual toil and warfare which imparts on the mind an athletic vigor and teaches it to contend with difficulties and to rely upon itself in emergencies. So, the magical teaching of children by George Boole's wife, Mary Everest, gives us a pre-existing vision and tradition of this kind of scientific education to science. And I applied my renewed, enhanced and transdisciplinary method in Aeroneia with great success in my battle against school phobia and cognitive emotional blocks in learning. On the other hand, with adults that simply and purely love the time of scientific meditation, I have trained the mind of my pupils with this shocking evidence that Plato called awakening truths in 7th book of Republic, that allow our mind to go beyond the crystallized word of either-or. This is a quotation from OECD. Going beyond the either-or, an illustration of reflectiveness. The ability to deal with differences and contradiction is found on many lists of key competences within the economic and educational sector. Today's diverse and complex world demands that we do not necessarily rush to a single answer, to an either-or solution, but rather handle tensions. And now I conclude. Waget zu denken, from Kafka and Lao Tse to Kant. Now, to realize its mission, Aeroneia is not only a specialized educational center, it is a global pedagogical, cultural and scientific answer to the unitary educational problem that is the problem of our unified Europe of knowledge and our globalized planet. In other words, Aeroneia is the microcosm of an entire educational type of politics. Why? Because my life has finally convinced me that without the simultaneous and synergic help of all positive forces of our world, a teacher will never be strong enough to make a child or adult that is terrorized by school go forth towards text and towards his inner interpretation of the world, that is toward its future life. In summary, the pedagogical, cultural and political reality of Aeroneia is thought to be the convergence perimeter of all human energies that, according to my vision, are necessary to give man the force to move towards symbols, that is to his truly human roots and destination, and to give symbols the concrete, that is historical possibility to nourish human life. Nonetheless, the path of informal education is a very difficult one. The system of formal education where I'm working is an extremely closed system, and all forms of international appeal to a formal informal collaboration very, very hard to be heard by formal system. In fact, I actively put forward Aeroneia's instance de dialogue systématique to political and educational institutions, but there is nothing better than the words of OST on the difficulties faced by non-formal and transdisciplinary teacher research when he proposed a new vision of education to the old intranational school, even if it is the same vision that is proposed by the most important international organization in the world. I translate this quotation from OECD. In the Castle, by describing the vain essays of Kay to realize his goals, Franz Kafka expresses all the hopelessness that fills a man that must fight against a blind machine. Such difficulties must not nonetheless let us surrender, and as Lao Tse has said, the way is the goal. I can only confirm that the creation of a new educational reality that aims to fight against school phobia, truancy and school difficulties, thus suggesting another meditative and reflexive method of education to scientific community, is quite a Kafkian experience. I want anyway to stress something very important. Perhaps I'm convinced the most important things to stress. Our globalized Western world is here now the place of violent institutional dialectics. Intranational education fights against the new international drives, and in the case of that international reality called Europe, Europe fights against itself. I have accepted this situation with an unconditioned Kantian fight, Waget zu denken, Sapere Aude, which is my Vernunftglauben, my rational fight, my fight in reason. Because if the Europe of nations fights against the Europe of its Euro-cosmopolitan citizens, this institutional war is anyway a great victory of peace. that is the beginning of a real new world.